Before we also tackle this title, we have to understand who we are. Now, Swedish Institute Network for Future Global Leaders. This is a network of Swedish Institute scholarship holders, and the network aims to build a lasting relationship between these scholarship holders who are studying in Sweden. These are scholars from all over the world, scholars from 41 countries, divided into different local networks based on the universities or on their focus. The goal is to strengthen leadership skills, increase the ability to run projects, develop active participation, and strengthen networks between scholarship holders. The network provides the possibility to participate in events, workshops, seminars, and visits to companies around Sweden. And it also aims to provide the scholarship holders with improved goodwill and knowledge about Sweden. So this event is made possible by the Swedish Institute through the Swedish Institute Network for Future Global Leaders, Södertörn. Södertörn is the local network organizing this event. And once again, I want to say welcome, everyone. As I hand over to the moderator, who will pilot this event. And the moderator is in the person of Ziyad Mohammed. He is a member and the partnership manager for the Swedish Institute Network for Future Global Leaders, Södertörn Local Network. So over to you, our moderator.
Okay, thank you, Genius. Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well. My name is Muhammad Ziyad. I'm one of the NFGL Södertörn members. I will be the moderator for today's discussion. Bear with me for around 1 hour. I would like to inform you that this meeting is being recorded, as Genius mentioned before. And please stay muted during this discussion to respect our guests and to make the discussion run smoothly. Okay. And if you have any question, you can write down your question on the chat and I will read that for you. Okay. So yeah, our topic today is sustaining UN SDGs through a pandemic, progress and lessons. And we already have a fantastic guest today, Chiagozie Udeh. He is the first Nigerian and West African and the only fourth African to be elected UNGO focal point, a youth constituency to the UNFCCC. He elected as the chairperson of Executive Global Board of Plan for the Planet after the historic launch of Trillion Trees campaign in 2019. Chiagozie helped to create a youth space in intergovernmental process of renewable energy and currently serve as the global focal point of UN SDG number 7, which is the affordable and clean energy. He is also the master student in University of Geneva, Switzerland. Hi, Chiagozie. Thank you so much for coming to our first event. I know it's busy, but yeah, it's a real honor to have you on board.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Good afternoon or evening, wherever you're joining us from. But it's my pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you, Chiagozie. Before we start, I would like to mention several information about SDGs and the pandemic, COVID-19. Now, we are facing a COVID-19 pandemic. I think this pandemic shows us the new world, one where the status quo no longer exists. And this COVID-19 is just the beginning. The UNDP estimates the global human development could fall this year by the first time since 1990, when the measurement began. And the pandemic presents both enormous challenge and tremendous opportunity for reaching the 2030 agenda. I think most of us already know about UN SDGs, but please allow me to refresh our knowledge about this, there are 17 SDGs, such as no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduce inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice and strong institution, and the last one is partnership for the goals. So yeah, I will start with my first question to our guest. I'm wondering about the UN SDGs number 7, affordable and clean energy. Why you are interested in this SDG, Chiagozie? Why this is important for you? Maybe you can tell us more about your experience.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the background, and also thanks for your question. I think first is that I started off my activism as a climate activist, and within the space of climate change, of course, there are a lot of thematic areas that we have to focus on. Coming from Nigeria, and as well coming from a continent that has over 600 million people without access to electricity, I totally understand what it means to create that access to electricity and the kind of co-benefits that result from that, and what currently people that don't have this access are facing. So for me, renewable energy was one of my most important ways of contributing to the climate change agenda. And for me, it was really important because I felt the way, while I was studying in a university in Nigeria, it was quite challenging. You never have electricity. You have to trek some kilometers or travel some kilometers to get stable internet and electricity. It reduces productivity. It frustrates you. It gives you some kind of artificial incompetence because the tasks you're supposed to deliver on time, you're not going to deliver them at the right time. So this is a challenge of a lot of developing countries, not just in Nigeria, because quite along my work, going around a couple of countries to see how they are doing in different areas, it appears it's quite a challenge in the most vulnerable places that should ordinarily have this. So that's quite a huge motivation for me to make sure, more importantly, that people are able to have access to electricity, but not just that, to also have a democratic way of using their electricity, to have control over the energy. And what is the best way for us to achieve this? In Africa, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, we have incredible resources of sunlight, and this comes naturally. I mean, it's really, it bewilds me how we are not, using this resource as much as we are, because I'm sure that if Europe was getting enough sunlight as we are doing, I'm sure the majority of their energy will be coming from the sun, and where I come from, that's not the case. We're still using, fossil fuel for energy. Sometimes you use the hydro, the dam, which has some, not well constructed, and the rest of them. So knowing that we don't have this electricity and a lot of people need it, like, it means a lot for our economy, for education, for our productivity. It was a huge motivation, and I just took on to that to see how we can bring this, to the ground level, to create businesses for young people, have like young youth startups in this space where they can bring renewable energy to the people. Of course, at the point where I started with my colleagues in the global south, renewable energy was quite expensive, but now it has increasingly, gone down. The prices has increasingly reduced. Solar to bioenergy to wind energy, it's getting very competitively reduced, and it's kind of an incredible, option for people to be able to have low cost energy, very efficient, without any impacts on their health, any negative impact on their health, eco-friendly, and from the sun. It's renewable. And when I mean having control over your energy, I mean energy democracy. I mean, it is a term we call energy democracy, to be able to determine what type of energy you want to use, how you want to use it, when you want to use it. So when you put a solar panel in your house, you control it. You control when you turn it on, when you turn it off, what quantity of energy you use, when you want to use them, and how you want them to be. You know, when you're onto the government, the national grid, you don't have this control. But when you have it on your own, or maybe you have like a mini grid in an estate, you can have control over the energy that you use. So we've tried to, you know, push through some national government processes in different countries to make sure that energy democracy is domesticated. In my country, it's quite a hassle because they're complicated policies. But yeah, we are getting there gradually. So this was my major motivation, and looking into the youth space as well. I saw some bottlenecks that didn't really create space for youth engagement in sustainable energy, and yeah, we had to do some work on fighting for that as well.
Okay, that's yeah, really fantastic. And you mentioned about the developing countries. I think this is interesting because about renewable energy is has been discussed for a long time, since a long time. And however, I think that it seems the developing countries are too late to anticipate and to mitigate this change. What do you think? Is it possible to achieve the target by 2030?
Well, 2030 targets, some countries are on course to achieve that. Not majority of the countries, I must mention, just a few countries. But in terms of developing countries, we cannot necessarily fault them too hard, you know, because we've been talking about climate change for decades, right? And it's only gaining traction recently. So what were all the developed countries doing before then? You know, we developing countries, non-Annex 1 countries, are suffering the consequences of huge industrial revolution in developed countries. They've polluted their waste to the top, and the impact of climate change, though visible in some developed countries, is most visible in developing countries. They are on the front lines of this disaster, you know, seeing it with the, you know, every day in their reality, yet they are contributing. For example, the whole of Africa contributes less than 4% global emission, you know, but they are facing flooding, they are facing the desertification, they are facing droughts, they are facing the drying up of lakes, and internal displacement of people owing to climate-induced disasters. So you can't fault them too hard. First is that they have development challenges to meet. For example, African countries, they have massive infrastructural deficits, which they have to meet. They have educational deficits, they have to meet the literacy, you know. They have unemployment, you know, to solve. So they have a bunch of problems to solve, and then they have to take care of problems that were created by countries that have developed in very magnifying ways. So you have to balance them. The only way they can meet this target is that developed countries are able to pay them to deploy or to develop in a green way. Because that's why we have, for example, the Paris Agreement and the Green Climate Fund. The Green Climate Fund is supposed to have $100 billion every year dedicated to supporting, you know, global South countries to do a lot of climate action. Most of them are mitigation in terms of deploying renewable energy. Some of them are adaptation measures. So if developing countries don't have this help in terms of resource mobilization, that they can focus on, you know, climate action, they cannot do that because their immediate resource, their immediate priority is to build the capacity of their people, to build their infrastructure, you know, to make sure that people have jobs. I mean, if they cannot meet these needs, there will be no government really, because people will protest. So you need to balance the current existing realities, immediate priorities of these countries, with also the existential threat of climate change to them. When you go over to small island developing states in the Pacific and the Caribbean, you look at states like Kiribati, you know, like Palu, like Vanuatu, it's the same story all around. In fact, for them, climate change is an immediate threat. In fact, there's one of them, like when you land on the airport, the airport is the only wide ground that they have, like plain ground that they have. So they play there all day, and when planes are landing, they stop so the planes can land and take off again. But this is the only ground they have, and this ground is being threatened by the sea level rising there. So once the sea rises to a significant level, it flows in, and they are totally submerged. So for them, it's an existential reality. And you realize that such people will lose their ancestral land very soon. So where are they gonna move to? And you know, when you see a lot of conversation about climate change, some people feel like it's just, you know, people making noise. It's not. It's a reality for many people, and it's very urgent and immediate, and they need to be supported. So for example, this small island developing state, their total budget may be like 1/50 of maybe a budget of California in a year. And then you expect them to use that budget to take care of the damages of climate change. It cannot even go anywhere. And you know the worst thing, some of the support given to these countries to tackle climate change are in form of loans. How are they going to pay back? When they are building embankments to save their country, more disasters are happening and breaking up the embankments. So the loan is already gone. And what is used to build is already gone as well. So there's a lot of problem, and people need to understand, especially decision makers, negotiators of developed countries. I mean, I mean, we understand it. You have to protect our country's interest, but then you have to be realistic also to know that when people are in this kind of existential threat, you have to take responsibility for how your actions have contributed in one way or the other to that.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you on that because we know that even before the pandemic, we already struggle to achieve the target. Yeah, and now we're facing the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's shown us a new world. It makes us more difficult to achieve the target, or maybe it's impossible. I don't know. What are the strategies to fulfill the SDG maybe during this condition now?
Well, first, we all thought the same. We thought that it would be difficult to achieve the SDGs, you know, before COVID. Yeah, but the reality of the COVID-19 pandemic has told us a lot of things. First is that it's a perpetual lie that the government does not have money. There's money. Second is that it will only take political will to achieve everything we want to achieve. And third is that we are not ambitious enough. Even with the Paris Agreement that we thought, oh, we are asking too much from the government. Are you sure we can do this? Are you sure we're not just pushing too hard? We even realized we are not even ambitious enough. For example, how much has the US spent on economic stimulus package over COVID for paying, you know, people who are unemployed and at home, over 40 million of them? How much have they spent? Trillions of dollars. That's what they've spent, right? This is the same with other countries across the world. They are spending heavily on economic stimulus package. What are we asking for the Green Climate Fund? In 1 year, we are asking for a measly $100 billion. $100 billion. That's all for the whole countries in the world to bring together. $100 billion, and we have to drag it. You know, so it's if you compare it with what member states are spending just for economic stimulus packages, you know, for recovery, it just shows you where the gap is. There's no political will and there's minimum ambition. So I'm pretty confident that if governments are committed to meeting the SDGs, we will meet that for sure. I mean, a lot of governments met the minimum, the Millennium Development Goals, which came before the SDGs, and that owed a lot to commitment. If you elect leaders who are competent, who have, you know, the interest of the population at hand, they will always, you know, tie in their agenda towards the SDGs. Is very comprehensive, very wholesome. Almost everything you would want to achieve in a healthy, in a progressive society is there. There's nothing that is not reflected there. There's also indicators that you can use to measure how these things are achieved. So though we are not significantly on the right path at this point, we can scale that. It only takes finances to scale that to a level where we can be comfortable. We have 10 years to go. We have a decade to go. And by 2021, which is just like a month away, we will enter the decade of action. We're launching the decade of action because we've not taken enough action in the last 5 years. So we need to launch this decade of action so we can take sufficient action that can deliver the SDGs by 2030. It's a wholesome goal, and it's a goal that interconnects and amplifies the essence of multilateralism to be able to ensure that we achieve this goal.
Okay, so I'm wondering, is there any existing effort by the government and policymakers in strengthening the implementation of SDGs, like during this pandemic?
Oh, of course, there are quite a bunch of efforts. First is that people have to first be healthy. So the priority of the government is to make sure that that the pandemic is won over, that we have vaccines to sort people out, that we have different things. But also, if you look at the EU, in the economic stimulus package, for example, they've put in components that ensure sustainability. Before you can access this financing, you tell us what your climate plans are, you tell us, how you're polluting here and there. Some are putting clauses, feature clauses in their donations and loans for decent work, human rights, democracy, different things. So this pandemic and the recovery from it is being used as an opportunity to tie in clauses that enhances the achievement of the SDGs in most countries. And do not forget also, a lot of countries are still doing immense things in different areas. We're not just focusing on achieving on chasing away the pandemic, but also on achieving concrete SDGs. For example, in gender equality, the pandemic has really heightened the cases of gender-based violence and the exacerbated inequality. And you see a lot of focus on that as well, where a lot of development workers and countries are focusing on that, creating dedicated channel to be able to manage the gender-based violence, to mainstream gender equality in their policies, even in their recovery and post-recovery policies at the national level. I can tell you this before, because quite frankly, in Nigeria, I was there around just when the pandemic began, and I tried to facilitate or host kind of a session that helped feed into a process, the national government process of how they respond to the pandemic, to make sure that it's gender sensitive, it caters to these areas of vulnerability, ensures that it reduces inequality, and sees how different arms of the government, different agencies of the government, including the police, are able to mainstream that into their operational mechanism. I'm sure different other countries did similar things, but just it seems that the focus is tilted towards ending the pandemic, which is rightly so. Once we are over the line, we can now focus on stopping a future pandemic from happening at this scale. There are a lot of different things that different gaps that existed that could have helped us manage this better. But yeah, it's also the responsibility of people in their countries to elect responsible leaders that can manage global situations.
Okay. Talking about the pandemic, like COVID-19, and several countries already implementing the lockdown strategies during this pandemic. What do you think about this policy, this strategy? Is it good for the SDGs or not? Because it has a direct impact to job employment, economies, and something like that.
Yes, I mean the lockdown is quite a sensitive topic in different climes. For some countries, it's not a problem; they can manage. For others, it's quite a problem. Of course, it's a general problem for employment, because definitely jobs were lost everywhere. Actually, no matter the policy you implemented. So it seems like the price to be paid, for this period, and then we can see how we bounce back better. Yes, there are arguments about it being a violation of human rights, but then, I mean, if you put it in context also, you would figure that the government, I mean, this is an evolving virus, right? So when it started, we didn't know what this virus was, but we are knowing new information about it every day, because it was a new virus. Of course, it was novel through the other coronaviruses. So they needed to understand how this virus behaves, how do we respond to it. The information was dynamic, changing step by step. And the government in that sense I think the most sensible thing to do was to advise people to stay home, right? And in most developed countries, it was maybe a lot easier because some were getting paid for staying home. In developing countries, it was a bit different because nobody pays you to stay home. If you lost your job, I mean, it was like a disaster. So a lot of these countries in the developing world have the informal sector as a major component of the economy. So when you're asked to stay home, you do nothing. Some of them, feed on a day-to-day basis. So it was quite difficult in these places. Yes, but then what is the other option? Do you allow people to be out there, going to clubs, working, enjoying themselves, and then recording 5,000 cases per day when your bed capacity is like 500? It doesn't really make sense if you reconcile that. So I think it depends on the national context really, but generally I think it's a duty as a responsible citizen to try to take care of each other, and that could mean staying at home at this period.
Okay, but in some point, I think that a regulation will affecting the poorest and the most vulnerable people to the most, I would say. And as a young generation, what kind of contribution, what kind of action that we can do to help them during this pandemic?
There are a lot of things to be done. First is to amplify their voices. A lot of the vulnerable people are not even able to get into the spaces where they can interact with decision makers. And the decision makers in some countries are so out of touch with reality at the local level that they don't even make policies that are so inclusive. So one way we could help to the vulnerable groups to be able to manage this situation is to bring their plight, amplify their problems to get the attention of decision makers. For example, in a lot of cases where you find that people are not having food to eat or are not having access to healthcare, especially people in rural areas, maybe people that are pregnant or something, they can't even get to the hospital because there's a lockdown, they don't have a vehicle, who is going to get them out? It is our responsibility as young people who have access to the internet, who have access to social media, who probably have access to some decision makers, to bring it to the attention of our MPs, of our national government, to know that this is existing here and that these people need this help. I know there are a bunch of crowd-funded initiatives that have happened during this period, led by young people of our generation to deliver food to many homes, to volunteer in many places, to take care of people, to provide masks, all manner of things. There's been quite a lot that has been done by people of our generation. But most importantly is to mainstream these things into policy context. For example, if the government is planning an economic stimulus package, we can advocate for some portion of this package to be made for specific people in this category, and we ensure that they're implemented by monitoring. We have a lot of young people who are working with different organizations, NGOs, and different things that are into accountability and transparency to ensure that this funds actually gets to the right people at the grassroots level that should receive them. I mean, if we're able to do this, I mean, we are not like the president of our country, so there's a limit to what we can do, but if we're able to make sure that things are delivered to the people that need them the most, in the places they are needed the most, in the right amount that they are needed, we would have done really well.
Okay, and you mentioned about the monitoring, about the progress, the process, and maybe monitoring all the SDGs, whether we can achieve that or not, whether it's good or not, and how they are monitoring these SDGs and how they assess these SDGs.
Yeah, I mean, the SDG has a lot of indicators that it's used to monitor. So first of all is that within the UN frame, we have what we call the voluntary national review. So every year during the high-level political forum, the high-level political forum of the UN happens around July every year. And then at the high-level political forum, you have the VNR, which is the voluntary national review, where member states report on how they have progressed on the SDGs. This usually around 46 member states every year who volunteer to report their progress on the SDGs. So they report best practices, challenges, everything, and you find a lot of exchanges on the various experiences of member states, how they're progressing. It's really, really, and that's, of course, you can extrapolate that some member states would say things that are not real. But in majority of them would say what they are doing on the ground, and others can learn and be inspired, to do more actions on that. But again, beyond that, there are a lot of NGOs, a lot of international NGOs, a lot of local NGOs who are monitoring on the ground what the government is doing, because some of the funding the governments receive, especially the developing countries, are tied to specific MDGs, and I mean to specific SDGs, and these NGOs are monitoring to make sure that they're going to the right places and they are reporting the effects it's having on people, whether it's working or not, whether it's been siphoned or not in some countries, and how things can be improved, to get really to the targeted groups. So the government monitoring, the NGO monitoring is one way to look at it, and there are a bunch of different approaches of monitoring. There are some digital processes that different organizations have on how to monitor. But for us, the more central process would be the high-level political forum review, which precedes, the the UN General Assembly.
Yeah, okay, that's the higher political forum, the highest political forum to decide that. Yeah. Do you think there are a lot of SDGs? Because a lot of SDGs to be monitored, it make us difficult. Is it too many or not?
Well, I mean, we can't pause the problems we have in the world. So there's so much problems that to last us for decades, for centuries. So as soon as we're able to solve them, I don't think it's a bad idea. I mean, we have 17 SDGs, all of them. The beauty of it is that all of them are interlinked, you know, so you can always find linkages with at least 5 SDGs at once, going from steps to step. So they are all sequenced, they're all linked to the same process. They are cross-cutting issues like gender equality, like education, you know, there are a bunch of cross-cutting issues that you have there. And they are all interlinked. I don't think they are too much, to be honest. I don't think they are too much. I think these are reasonable goals that we should be achieving. And you can't want to choose one over the other. Of course, some of us can be selfish because we have specific interests and the ones we think are most urgent, but you can't really choose one over the other because they are absolutely vital and they need to be delivered as soon as possible. We still have people dying for maternal health care reasons, you know, for air pollution. I mean, it's insane. You still have gender-based violence where people are being, you know, beaten, intimidated. Women don't have access to land. They don't have right to own property. You know, it's insane to hear in our generation. And you have countries or parts of countries where education literacy is like 36%. You know, where the other part is like 98. So there's a gulf that you have to bridge. And if you don't bridge the gulf, it will bite you tomorrow. So the earlier you do it, the better.
And yeah, like what happened if we can't achieve the target by 2030? Like, is it will be extended or they will still want it on 2030?
Well, about achieving the target, I've also asked the same question within our space to know. I mean, we are looking that this will be achieved by 2030. There could be something cooking maybe by mid-decade to check where we are and to know the next line of action. I think by 2025, we will know clearly if we're extending this target or if we're developing new goals. In my opinion, personal opinion strictly, I would think that it could be extended. Yes, but then of course there could be some dynamics. If all governments behave super well and we achieve this goal by 2030, wow, we will be really home and dry. But I would think it will be extended.
Okay, and it will be discussed again in the highest political forum of the
Absolutely,
UN.
absolutely. It will be a decision of the General Assembly of the UN to extend or not, depending on where national governments are. If we have significantly, maybe over 50% of the countries achieving that, then there could be no extension. We could develop new goals. But if less than 50% are still struggling, I mean, have not gone anywhere, we probably would have a rethink. Nothing is cast in stone. I think it will, just like I said, it will be clearer by 2025, but yeah, it could be extended at this scale.
Okay, so yeah, as a young people, like, what kind of contribution that we can give to that forum? How can we join that forum?
You mean the SDGs?
The SDGs forum.
Yeah, perfect. There are quite in many ways you can join this space. First is we have the youth engagement mechanism within the UN, which is called the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth. So the UNMGCY is a mandated space enshrined in Agenda 21 of the UN. Decades ago, really, 1992 thereabouts. So we've been, you know, in existence for a long time, and this is the main youth engagement mechanism within the UN. It has different working groups. These working groups are evolving, you know, as we move from goals to goals, depending on the UN dynamics. So they are permanent working groups, or what you call constituencies, you know, in this space. For example, you have a climate change constituency, which is permanent for the UNFCCC, no matter how things evolve in the future. You have the UNEP MGCY, which is permanent for UNEP, UN environment, you have a youth engagement mechanism. You also have for habitat, but then within the MGCY, you have different working groups. One, the constituency on gender, SDG 5. You have the constituency for us, for example, SDG 7, the sustainable energy youth constituency. You have the one for oceans, SDG 14. You have for decent work, SDG 8, that works a lot with ILO. You have for health, SDG 3, good health and well-being. You have the one for SDG 2, which works closely with the FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization. So we have just across board. We have for cities, the UN Habitat Youth Constituency. We have for peace and security as well. They are making inroads within the UN Security Council as well. So we are all covered in different areas. We have the one for water as well. The Water Youth Network leads that constituency. So the different areas to really engage. And I would encourage anyone that wants to engage with the SDGs to sign up to the MGCY. I would say like the website is unmgcy.org, and you'll find like get involved. You sign up to the constituency, choose the working group that pleases you the most, and you will be in. And we have really nice engagement. We are mainstreamed throughout the UN engagement process. We make interventions at very high level decision-making processes. We engage with the UN. They consult us a lot on different things. I mean, it's mandatory that they consult us actually. So, and we had a lot of opportunities to send, young people to different fora, to represent us in different areas, to speak on our behalf, and to facilitate different processes. So this year we're all doing everything virtually, but in a normal year, we're always kind of all over the place with our colleagues to do some representational role and do some meaningful youth engagement. And it's very important for us because, I mean, we fought to have this space. And what is important in this to understand also is that we promote the spirit of collective engagement of young people over individualism, right? So because oftentimes you find that challenges when, the one person is crowned like a champion of this space, champion of climate change activism, champion. We don't do that. Everybody is equal, and we promote collectivism. So if you're going to represent us, for example, at the UN General Assembly, we are going to write your speech for you. You speak for the whole constituency. You're not speaking for yourself. So that spirit of collective youth engagement gives us power to demand for one thing, to call on government to act, and also to disrupt things that are not working. Sometimes when we, for example, in the climate change space, when we're having sessions and we see that it's infiltrated by oil companies, we show some radical activism. It sometimes disrupts the events. And it's for us to protect our future because it's our future. So we have to take absolute control of whatever happens in the process. It's a very nice place to engage, build capacity, understand the process, and gives you clear perspective of where you want to head in the future.
Okay, Chiagozie. So we can access the unmgcy.org, and then we can choose the working group for that. Yeah. And I think you also interested in the SDGs number 13, if I'm not mistaken. Is it from
SDG.
Sorry?
That's my main SDG actually.
Oh, okay, that's your main SDGs. Is it from the UNMGCY or?
Yes, of course, but it's within the UNFCCC. It's called, the youth constituency is called the Yongo. Last year was the global focal point.
Oh, okay, that's really good. I saw that you already planned 1 trillion trees campaign. Yeah, from through the planet, Plan for the Planet in Nigeria.
Maybe that's actually one of my primary organizations. So it's a global campaign. It's not a Nigerian campaign. We actually launched that campaign in Monaco in 2018. Right. And the idea is that we had, thanks to Wangari Maathai, the Kenyan Nobel laureate, we had her hand over the Billion Trees campaign of the UN to us, in 2009. Handed it over to our founder, which was Felix. He was 9 then, and he was championing this, tree planting initiative. And Wangari Maathai handed over this Billion Trees campaign of the UN to us with the official tree count of the UN. And since then, we've not looked back. We've been planting trees. And in 2018, leading up to 2018, we're trying to see, that we need to grow this ambition. How do we grow that? That we need to have a solid scientific backing, so we're not just saying things because it sounds nice to plant trees, but how do we, back them up to say that this is what you get by planting this number of trees? So we had to engage. Crowder Lab is in Zurich in Switzerland here, and it's they did amazing, fantastic work to do researches for us on how many trees existed, and we found there were 3 trillion trees existing in the world, and how much space is left without touching existing forest. How much trees can we reforest? And we found that there are spaces for at least 1 trillion more trees. So that's the basis for the trillion trees count. So we now on this basis plan the launch of a trillion trees campaign. We have an app, very convenient app that can enable you plant trees from wherever you are in the world. So different projects anywhere you want in the world to get like tax deductible receipts if you want, and give your friends gifts and everything else. So we have this app, and we have a bunch of projects across countries registered in this app to plant these trees. But we realized that we cannot do this alone. We needed to galvanize a global stakeholders of tree planting organizations to launch into this initiative, take it up, and grow from there. Today, you see the World Economic Forum has a 1 trillion tree.org thing they are doing. You see even people like Donald Trump are even involved in trillion trees campaign, quite surprising. But yeah, we've gained sufficient traction in the last years, and we're also growing our app. I'm very happy and privileged to work with some developers in that space, and also our lead, our chief technology officer, who is doing incredibly amazing work leading all these developers and facilitating the development of this. We're not there. It will take a lot of time, but we are working differently with different private companies that are sustainability efficient to be able to achieve these goals as soon as possible.
Okay, that sounds really cool. I'm just wondering, did you get the sponsor or support from the Red Plus or some organization like that?
Oh, for Red Plus, they did basically do this at a national level. So maybe some of the projects on our app got support from Red Plus, but we don't control that. But for us, what we do is to facilitate with our app. We facilitate exchanges. Like if you had a project, for example, in Nepal that is doing massive afforestation work, and you register on our platform, we verify with maps, searchlight, everything that you're doing with documents, and we have you on the platform. Once you register a project published on the platform, you can access donations. So people will come to the app and say, oh, I want to plant a tree for my friend's birthday. I want to choose a project in maybe Argentina, and I find a project in Argentina, I donate to them. We do not receive financing for this donation. All we do is to facilitate that they find projects to donate to. So, but then for some companies or some tree planting organizations in the global south, they don't have, they cannot access some payment tools in their countries. So they donate through us, and then when at the end of the month, maybe when it gets to a bulk, we transfer it to them, because they cannot receive donation directly because those payment platforms do not operate in their countries. So we don't take commissions for the donation. We just facilitate that they're able to find projects to donate to. Our foundation operates different initiatives that we get, donation maybe from the German government or different other governments or some private companies to run that. But for this project, they are strictly based on citizen pooled donation, and some private companies also have donated. Recently, we had a partnership with Salesforce. So you could see like a link on Salesforce website where their staff and all their clients are encouraged to, donate for every engagement they have with Salesforce. And we also planning different initiatives with other technology companies. We had conversations with Twitter, and we're also trying to progress that with other companies going forward.
Okay. And about your apps, is it only for integrating the citizens and this sponsor, or you consider to have like carbon trading as well in the future? Or
yes, we have carbon offsets. We have carbon offset programs already. You may not easily find them on the app, or you can just email our office, and yeah, they will work that out for you. We've not fully put them on the app because, of course, we are still trying to examine all the modalities involved. We are quite cautious of carbon trading and carbon offsets, so it doesn't appear as greenwashing. So we have to be sure it's concrete and just not like letting people off, oh, go pollute and come and offset. Now, it has to have some concrete mechanism that ensures that the ethics are maintained and why people are serious about really taking concrete climate action. Yeah, but once you email our office, we can always work out a partnership on that.
Okay, so you avoid to the greenwashing.
Yeah, sure.
Like
We don't.
it's really good to have that.
Try to be very careful so that you don't provide a platform where people feel lazy to do anything else. They just say, "But I paid already, and I can pollute." It doesn't mean that. You have to have concrete commitment. You are donating, but then as well you are doing your best to mitigate as much as possible how much you pollute. Yeah.
Okay, I still have one question about. I think you mentioned about the Paris Agreement, and
Yes.
regarding about that, we know that the U.S. already withdrawn from the Paris Agreement. What do you think about that? What are the impacts to the Sustainable Development Goals?
Yeah, we know they will withdraw. Even we knew they will withdraw from Paris Agreement as early as 2016. Yeah. So the day Donald Trump was confirmed as the elected president of the United States, that's, I think it was November 2016. We are just like having the Conference of Parties in Morocco, in Marrakesh, and we had people like John Kerry there who was coming to do his final sessions before he leaves office with Obama. And everybody was like moody, when they announced Donald Trump. We knew they would withdraw, so it's not a new thing to us. But of course, thankfully they will be back soon. So they're coming back in January, so they're not gone for so much. They only managed to withdraw like a few days ago, so they're back in January. It's kind of funny, but yeah, it's been difficult really engaging with US diplomats within these years that Donald Trump was occupying office, because when you go to talk to them, and I mean, you see the passion is there to do things, but they are kind of twisted. It's just confusing. Like you feel pity for some of them because they worked so hard to get this deal over the line, and then now someone comes in and says, "Oh, we are gonna pull out." It's kind of weakens you from the very marrow. But we're happy they'll be back. The US is super important. Make no mistake about it. Financially, they're super important in terms of showing example, leading the way, and galvanizing countries to come together. They are super important, especially when the right person is in the office, right? So it's very important to have the US back. We're super happy to have them back, and it will, bring the needed gel in multilateral process of climate change to progress. Because last year, you can't believe it, last year, but the US we were one of the biggest disruptors of our negotiation process on climate change, the one we had in Madrid, the COP25. It was just like blocking everything, with some very annoying countries. So now that they're back on the good side, yeah, we're super happy to have them back, and they'll be very, very, very vital.
Oh, okay. That's really good. Okay. And next we can continue to our next session is a question and answer from the audience. If you guys have any question, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself, or you can write your question in the chat and I will read that for you. Is it okay? We still have some minutes left. I have one question here from the registration from Udeh. She asked that, how do I join or collaborate with teams eager to take action in making the world a better place?
Well, it depends. I mean, you have to, first of all, I think it's very important that we know this, that you have to, first of all, identify a niche, an area where you want to play. If you want to be in democracy space, in climate change, in water, what is it that you're passionate about? You have to understand your passion. You have to identify how you want to engage this passion. Once you've identified that, you have to put in all your efforts to make sure that people understand that this is your niche, this is your space, this is where you play. It's really important so you can have a focused engagement. And then, of course, there are a lot of youth organizations out there. It's always important that, I mean, for you to have the big have to know clearly which one is officially aligned. I mean, at this level and stage, we should be able to distinguish between fake and real. So you have to know which organization is officially aligned with the UN, which official UN you can easily engage on the specific spaces that appeals most to your interest. This collaboration with young people, I tell you, is super important. These days, your network skills are really essential to many things you can be able to achieve. And it's really, really easy to grow faster, you know, with the very right networks. So please go for it.
Okay, we have another question here from Christina. Do you find the experience in Sweden, not imposing a lockdown, positive for the agenda in the pandemic conditions?
I don't want to sound politically correct, but
yeah.
I would say, I mean, it's neither here nor there. Countries have to consider their national context and national situation to know what to do. In some countries, imposing lockdown means that the government in power will lose election in the next polls. In other countries, a lockdown means that the government care about the people. So it depends on the context. Initially, Sweden were praised for their measures because it didn't restrict people, things were happening at the same time. But it didn't last long, and we figured that they were quite, you know, maybe not the best model, because some people wanted to copy the model, but then they said, oh, no, wait a minute, what is happening here? And they backed down. So it may not exactly be, I mean, there's no super right model for this. It depends on your national context. You could look at New Zealand and say, oh, they are fantastic. They did amazing, this and that. But if you implement the same policies within your country in different ways to produce different results. For most of the countries that really managed to put the pandemic to an end, what they only did is to follow the WHO guidelines to the maximum. They probably had more control of their citizens, you know, and we're able to follow the recommendation of WHO to the maximum with extra, maybe an additional restrictions. So I think for Sweden, it's neither here nor there. It's a situation that should be determined by the national context.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Is there any other question from the audience? We still have some minutes left. Yeah, or Chiagozie, is there any important information that you would like to share?
Well, I mean, as always, I always like to say, you know, for us as young people, this planet is ours. The world is ours. I don't see myself as a citizen of the country where I was born or come from. I see myself as a global citizen. Primarily, first, I want to be selfish and say I see myself as an African citizen, but at the bigger context, as a global citizen who has the responsibility to make sure that the world is better anywhere I am. So I take that responsibility, it's internalized in me that no matter where I am, I have to champion this globalization agenda and sustainable development in different contexts. So we must see the world in the prism of ownership. We must own this world as ours. Like it's ours. People in their 70s, in their 60s, in their 50s are going. We are here for the long haul, and we have to take absolute control of what happens for the next 30, 40 years. It's our world to design, and we must stand to be counted in designing that world. Nobody will design it for us. I mean, of course, the older people want to design it for us, but we'll not allow them to design what they want for us. So, I mean, they can't even use Instagram, and they want to design our world. So we have to design our world ourselves and live with it the way that is best for us, that we are not limiting the resources that the next generation would be able to use. So I want us to engage at spaces where we have decision makers on the same table as equal partners if that means engaging through the political space, if that means engaging through the development space, if that means engaging through civil society, we must get engaged, challenge decision makers, and bring concrete agendas that affect us to the table.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that this discussion is just the beginning. In fact, that one important thing is how the government, how the policy maker would respond to this issue fundamentally. This conversation should need to happen again and again and again, I would say, in everywhere in the world, because like global climate change is not a distant problem, not distant in time, I would say. We are talking a generation or more, and the question like how we are vulnerable, how we are gonna respond to that, how we are effective, our response, and what are the costs. I think by grabbing and reaching the local communities, the more we also realize that the mitigation is important. For instance, by planting trillion trees, reducing fossil fuel, and using more renewable energy is so important. Yeah. So thank you again for our speaker, Chiagozie Udeh, the global focal point SDG 7 of the UNGO, the Youth Constituency of the UNFCCC. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and knowledge in our first event.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I just saw a question there asking about if there are any age limits for MGCY. The age limit, you have to be a young person, usually from 18 to 30, but I mean, not 18 actually, just children age to 30, but then for the African Union, and to be able to accommodate the African Union age limit of 35, we also extend it to 35. So we can say a bit basically from 35 downwards.
Okay.
Thanks for having me. My absolute pleasure being here. Thank you, Mohammed, for your moderation, and thank you, Janice, also for your invitation. My absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for starting this already, and I wish you success in your next editions. I hope they are bigger than this one.
And I hope that we can meet in person as well. Yeah, someday.
Yeah, sure. I mean, once the pandemic is over, I have a bunch of engagements to do in Sweden as well. So it'll be good to see, to meet physically and have also some amazing conversation.
Okay. I also would like to thank everyone for joining this event. This is just the beginning. Hope we can meet you again in our next event. Maybe from the head of SI NFGL Södertörn, you have something to say?
Thank you very much. The only thing I have to say is to thank you and thank you and thank you again. So on behalf of NFGL Södertörn, I want to say thank you to Mr. Chiagozie Udeh, and thank you, Ziyad. It's been a wonderful session. Chiagozie, you've shared your story with us, you shared your experiences. At least we can hit our chest and say, we understand the progress of SDGs at the moment. We can actually say that. I got a lot of insight from what you're saying. But one of the things I also got is that it is heartbreaking because from your calculations, you that is at the center of fulfilling SDGs, from your calculations, you think it might not be achieved by 2030, and that's heartbreaking. So, but we join SINFGL enjoys every young person to participate and contribute to the SDGs. That's one of the major pillars of the Network for Future Global Leaders. Trying to achieve and create more impact through the SDGs. So we thank you for being part of this event, and we thank our moderator. And of course, I want to also recognize board members of NFGL Södertörn. They are all here. So I want to recognize every one of you, and I want to say thank you for organizing this event. And finally, to the participants, really thank you very much for bringing out your time to be part of this event. Like we mentioned earlier on, this event is recorded, and you will find a video recording on the YouTube page of NFGL Stockholm. Just go on YouTube, check out NFGL Stockholm after today, and you'll find the YouTube, the video. So at this point, we want to say thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, our guest. And thank you, our moderator. Thank you, the board members. and thank you, our participants. And have a lovely, for those of us that are expressing winter, lovely winter.
Hello? Yeah.